7 local men who believed they were delivering divine justice. Dozens of innocent people tortured and murdered in what became known as the Sinners Purge of 1871. The state's main archives contained a survivor's testimony, so disturbing that authorities refused to make it public for over a century. Tonight, we reveal what really happened behind the walls of the old Mercy Creek settlement. Before we continue with the story of Mercy Creek, this channel is not for everyone, only for the most combustible souls who dare to unravel the darkest chapters of American history. If you dare to hear what really happened in the shadows of our past, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments which state you're listening from. Are you brave enough to join our community of true mystery hunters? Let's find out together. What makes this story particularly chilling is that it was not motivated by religious fanaticism or supernatural forces, but by something much more terrifying: the calculated pursuit of moral cleansing at any human cost, hidden behind a facade of Christian charity. In the summer of 1871, 7 respected members of the Mercy Creek community decided that their town needed purification. They believed certain residents were corrupting their sacred land with immoral behavior. What started as public shaming quickly escalated into something far more sinister. These men, who called themselves the Pure Seven, began systematically hunting down anyone they deemed unworthy of salvation. Their methods were brutal, their judgment final, and their actions would haunt Mississippi for generations to come. But the Pure Seven's reign of terror was just beginning. What they did next would make their previous acts look like child's play. The survivor's testimony, written in shaking handwriting across 17 pages, describes scenes that would make even the most hardened investigators sick to their stomachs. Mary Catherine Hendricks, then only 19 years old, managed to hide in the settlement's root cellar for 3 days while the Pure Seven conducted their cleansing. She watched through a crack in the wooden floor as they dragged her neighbors from their homes. The screams echoed through the night air as these 7 men, who had once led Sunday prayers and blessed newborn babies, became something far more terrifying than any monster from folklore. What Mary Catherine witnessed was methodical, calculated. The Pure Seven had divided the settlement into sections, working through each area systematically. They kept detailed records of their victims, noting their supposed sins and the punishments they received. But here's where the story takes a turn that will chill you to the bone. Mary Catherine's testimony reveals that the Pure Seven were not acting alone. They had been receiving letters, instructions. Someone was telling them exactly who to target and how to carry out their twisted vision of purification. The letters were signed with a single initial that would change everything we thought we knew about Mercy Creek. The letter M, the same M that appeared on official state documents authorizing the establishment of the settlement. Someone in a position of power, someone with access to government resources, was orchestrating the entire purge from the shadows. The question that haunts investigators to this day is simple yet terrifying. If the Pure Seven were just following orders, who was really behind the Sinners Purge of 1871? The identity of the mysterious M would remain hidden for decades, buried beneath layers of government bureaucracy and deliberate cover-ups. But sometimes, the truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. In 1943, during World War II, the federal government began requisitioning old state buildings for military use. When they cleared out the basement archives of the Mississippi State Capitol, workers discovered a metal box welded shut and hidden behind a false wall. Inside that box were documents that would shatter everything historians thought they knew about Mercy Creek. The papers were correspondence between the Pure Seven and their mysterious contact. But these weren't just instructions for murder. They were detailed psychological profiles of each victim, complete with personal histories, family connections, and most disturbing of all, financial records. Every single person targeted by the Pure Seven had one thing in common. They were all inheritors of valuable land grants along the Mississippi River, land that would become incredibly valuable once the railroad expansion reached that area in the 1880s. Here's the revelation that changes everything about the Sinners Purge. The letter M didn't stand for a person's name. It stood for Mississippi Land Development Company, a front organization that was systematically acquiring river territory through murder and legal manipulation. The Pure Seven weren't religious fanatics at all. They were hired killers disguised as moral crusaders. The supposed sins of their victims were completely fabricated. The detailed records they kept weren't about spiritual purification. They were property transfer documents, meticulously cataloging each piece of land that would change hands after the owners were eliminated. The entire settlement of Mercy Creek was nothing more than a killing ground designed to clear valuable territory for future development. But here's what makes this revelation truly terrifying. The Mississippi Land Development Company wasn't just some local criminal organization. The signatures on those hidden documents belonged to sitting state senators, federal judges, and railroad executives. The Sinners Purge was sanctioned at the highest levels of government. Mary Catherine Hendricks hadn't just witnessed a massacre. She had seen the birth of a conspiracy that would shape Mississippi's development for generations. And if the government went to such lengths to hide these documents for 70 years, what else might they be concealing about Mercy Creek? The most chilling question remains unanswered. If this conspiracy reached so high into the power structure of 1871, and if these families accumulated vast wealth from the blood-soaked land of Mercy Creek, who are their descendants today? The truth is, we might not have to look very far to find those descendants. In fact, they might be closer than we ever imagined. My name is Rosa Santos, and I'm 78 years old. I spent 40 years cleaning houses for wealthy families in Jackson, Mississippi. Most people don't pay attention to the help, but I've always had good ears and an even better memory. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about Mercy Creek. In 1987, I was working for the Whitmore family. Judge Harrison Whitmore had one of those big plantation houses filled with old paintings and family documents. Every week, I dusted his study while he conducted his business. That's when I started noticing the phone calls. He would talk about land deals, about keeping certain information buried, about maintaining the family legacy. But it was the names that caught my attention. Here's what nobody knew until now. Judge Whitmore kept a private safe behind his grandfather's portrait. One day, while cleaning, I saw him open it. Inside were the original contracts from the Mississippi Land Development Company. But there was something else that made my blood run cold. The contracts weren't just signed by government officials from 1871. They were signed by their sons in 1901, their grandsons in 1931, and their great-grandsons in 1961. This conspiracy didn't end with the Sinners Purge. It continued, generation after generation, with the same families controlling the same blood-soaked land for over a century. The descendants of the Mississippi Land Development Company are still here. They're still in power, and they're still profiting from the murders at Mercy Creek. But here's the revelation that will shake you to your core. Judge Whitmore wasn't just keeping records of the past. He was planning for the future. Those phone calls I overheard weren't about old business. They were about new acquisitions, new obstacles to remove, new ways to expand their empire built on bones. If these families have been operating in the shadows for 150 years, using murder and manipulation to accumulate power and wealth, what makes us think they stopped in 1871? What makes us think the killing ever really ended? The truth about those families and their ongoing operations runs deeper than anyone could have imagined. What I discovered in Judge Whitmore's house connects directly to events happening right now in our present day. I kept cleaning that house for 3 more years after I saw those contracts. During that time, I memorized every name, every date, every signature on those documents. The Whitmores, the Caldwells, the Bishops, the Tanners, 7 family names that have controlled Mississippi politics and business for generations. But what I learned in 1990 changed everything I thought I knew about their operations. Judge Whitmore's son, Robert, came to visit that autumn. They thought I was just another invisible maid, so they spoke freely during dinner. Robert worked for the State Environmental Agency, the same department that approves land development projects. Robert explained to his father that they had identified 17 families currently living on prime riverfront property. These families had been there for decades, some since the 1920s, but they lacked proper legal documentation for their land claims. The state could seize the territory under eminent domain, but there was a faster way. Here's the revelation that will turn your blood to ice. Project Mercy was using the exact same methods as the Sinners Purge, but with modern tools. Instead of calling people sinners, they were having them declared mentally unstable. Instead of the Pure 7, they were using corrupt social workers and planted evidence. Instead of outright murder, they were engineering accidents and suicides that would clear the land for development. Robert showed his father newspaper clippings From the past 5 years, 17 families had already been eliminated. Every single death was ruled natural causes or accidental. Every single property was immediately seized by the state and sold to shell companies owned by the same 7 families. The most terrifying part, Robert mentioned they were expanding Project Mercy beyond Mississippi. They had contacted descendants of the original conspiracy in Louisiana, Alabama, and Tennessee. The blood-soaked legacy of Mercy Creek was spreading across the entire South, using government agencies as weapons against innocent families. But here's what made me realize the true scope of their evil. Robert pulled out a current list of targets, active families they planned to eliminate within the next 2 years. I recognized some of those names from my own community in Jackson, people I went to church with, people whose grandchildren played in my neighborhood. The descendants of the Mississippi Land Development Company aren't just profiting from old murders, they're actively committing new ones, using the power of the state government to cover their tracks. And if they're willing to kill entire families for riverfront property, what would they do to someone who knows the truth about their operations? What I'm about to tell you will make everything you just heard seem like child's play. Because I wasn't just a cleaning lady who overheard conversations, I was placed in that house deliberately. My real name isn't Rosa Santos. It's Rosa Hendricks Santos. Mary Catherine Hendricks was my great-grandmother, the same Mary Catherine who survived the Sinners Purge and wrote that 17-page testimony that authorities buried for over a century. Before she died in 1943, my great-grandmother didn't just leave behind her written testimony. She left behind a mission. She made my grandmother promise to keep watching the families responsible for Mercy Creek. When my grandmother passed in 1967, that responsibility fell to me. For 40 years, I wasn't just cleaning houses in Jackson. I was gathering evidence. Every document I saw, every conversation I overheard, every name I memorized, it was all part of a plan that began in 1871 when Mary Catherine crawled out of that root cellar. But here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about Mercy Creek. My great-grandmother's testimony wasn't just about what she witnessed during the Sinners Purge. Hidden in the margins of those 17 pages, written in a code that only our family knew, Mary Catherine documented something far more terrifying. She had discovered the real reason the Pure Seven chose Mercy Creek for their killing ground. That settlement wasn't built on valuable riverland by accident. It was built on top of a mass grave containing the bodies of an entire Cherokee village that had been wiped out in 1832. The Mississippi Land Development Company had been systematically eliminating indigenous populations for decades before they ever hired the Pure Seven. The descendants of these families haven't just been murdering for riverfront property. They've been covering up a genocide that spans nearly 2 centuries. Every development project, every land grab, every accident that clears valuable territory, it's all designed to bury the evidence of their original crimes deeper underground. What makes this revelation truly terrifying is what I found in Judge Whitmore's safe that I never told anyone until now. They've been hunting my family for 150 years. Every generation, they've been tracking down the descendants of Mary Catherine Hendricks, making sure none of us ever live long enough to tell the complete truth about what really happened at Mercy Creek. But here's what they don't know. After 40 years of gathering evidence, after decades of pretending to be just another invisible cleaning lady, I didn't just memorize their secrets. I documented everything, and I've been teaching my granddaughter exactly what they taught me. The question that should terrify these families isn't what I might reveal before I die. It's what happens when an entire bloodline refuses to stay buried. The truth is, my granddaughter isn't the only one they'll have to face, because Mary Catherine Hendricks had 7 children, not just one like the family records show. My great-grandmother knew that if the conspiracy families ever discovered the full scope of her bloodline, they would launch another purge to eliminate every witness. So she scattered her children across different states, gave them different last names, and made sure none of them knew about the others until it was safe. For 150 years they thought they were hunting down a single family line, but there are 43 of us spread across the South, all descendants of Mary Catherine Hendricks, all of us trained from childhood to gather evidence, to watch, to remember, and to wait. The bishops in Alabama have been documenting land seizures in their state since the 1920s. The tanners in Louisiana never realized their cleaning lady was actually a Hendricks descendant photographing their private documents for decades. Every corrupt judge, every planted social worker, every staged accident, we've been recording it all. But here's the revelation that will destroy everything they've built since 1871. We didn't just inherit the mission to expose their crimes, we inherited something far more dangerous to their empire. Mary Catherine didn't just survive the Sinners Purge by hiding in a root cellar. She survived because she stole the original land grants and property deeds while the Pure Seven were conducting their massacre. Every piece of territory they've developed, every fortune they've built, every acre they've claimed for the past century and a half, it's all been legally invalid from the very beginning. The real bombshell isn't that we have evidence of their murders. It's that we have proof that none of their land acquisitions were ever legitimate. 43 descendants of Mary Catherine Hendricks are about to file simultaneous lawsuits that will strip these families of everything they've stolen since Mercy Creek. But if these families have been willing to commit genocide to protect their empire, what will they do when they discover that the Hendricks bloodline has been playing a game of chess that started in 1871 and we're about to deliver checkmate? But what these families never suspected is that one of us was much closer to their operation than they ever imagined. My name is Carmen Silva, and I'm 81 years old. I've been living in Jackson, Mississippi since 1963, when I moved here from São Paulo to work as a nanny for American families. What I'm about to tell you will expose the true scope of their international network, because the descendants of Mercy Creek didn't just expand across the American South. They've been using foreign workers like me to carry out their dirty work for decades, knowing that immigrant women would never be believed if we tried to speak out. I spent 27 years raising the children of the Caldwell family. During that time, I learned perfect English, but I always pretended to understand less than I actually did. Rich families talk freely around the help when they think you can't follow their conversations. That's how I discovered Project Mercy wasn't just about clearing Mississippi Riverland. Judge Caldwell's private study contained maps of Brazil, specifically the Amazon region where my own family had been forced off their land by mysterious buyers in the 1950s. The same shell companies that seized property after the staged accidents in Mississippi were operating in South America, using identical methods to eliminate indigenous families and small farmers. Here's the revelation that will shatter everything you think you know about these families. The Mercy Creek conspiracy wasn't inspired by American greed alone. It was funded from the very beginning by European investors who had been practicing genocide and land theft in South America since the 1800s. The Pure Seven weren't just hired killers. They were testing new methods of elimination that would later be exported to Brazil, Colombia, and Peru. The letters signed with M didn't come from the Mississippi Land Development Company. They came from a German banker named Müller, who was coordinating land seizures across 2 continents. The same families who destroyed Mercy Creek were simultaneously destroying villages throughout the Amazon, using local authorities as weapons against indigenous populations. But here's what makes this international conspiracy truly terrifying. I wasn't placed with the Caldwell family by accident. Müller's organization had been tracking families displaced from South America, recruiting us as domestic workers to spy on their American operations. They wanted to make sure their connected families in Mississippi were following orders and maintaining secrecy. For 27 years, I was supposed to be reporting back to handlers in Brazil about everything I witnessed in the Caldwell house, but I never sent a single report. Instead, I've been documenting their international network, photographing documents, and recording conversations that prove the Mercy Creek genocide was just one small piece of a worldwide operation that's still active today. The question that should terrify everyone listening is this: if they've been coordinating mass murder across multiple continents for over a century, and if they have operatives embedded in households around the world, how many other Carmen Silvas are out there, and what happens when we all decide to stop staying silent? What I discovered in those 27 years goes far beyond what any of us imagined, because I wasn't just documenting the Caldwell family's crimes in Mississippi. Every month, Judge Caldwell received visitors from other countries, men who spoke Portuguese, Spanish, and German. They brought briefcases filled with photographs of land they wanted to acquire, but these weren't empty territories. The meetings always followed the same pattern. They would spread maps across the dining room table, marking areas with red ink. Then they would discuss timelines, methods, and which local authorities had been bought off. I listened to them plan the elimination of entire communities across 5 different countries. In 1989, I watched Judge Caldwell approve the destruction of a village in the Amazon that I recognized from the photographs. It was Santo Antonio, where my own sister lived with her family. 2 months later, I received a letter from Brazil telling me that my sister, her husband, and their 3 children had died in a mysterious fire that consumed their entire settlement. Here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about Mercy Creek. The Pure 7 weren't the beginning of this conspiracy. They were the end result of decades of testing and refinement. Mueller's organization had been perfecting mass elimination techniques in South America since the 1840s, using indigenous populations as test subjects for methods they would later bring to the United States. Every strategy used at Mercy Creek had been tested first on my people. The systematic hunting, the moral justifications, the detailed record-keeping, the government cover-ups, it all originated in the Amazon, where entire tribes were eliminated to clear land for European investors. But here's what makes this revelation truly terrifying. I wasn't the only South American domestic worker placed with these families. There were dozens of us, all survivors of communities that had been destroyed by the same organization. They brought us to America not just as spies, but as living trophies of their successful genocide campaigns. The question that should haunt everyone listening is this: if Mueller's organization has been perfecting elimination techniques for 180 years, and if they're still actively operating across multiple continents, what new methods are they testing right now, and which communities are next on their list? The most terrifying part about Mueller's organization isn't what they've done in the past. It's what I discovered they're planning for the future, because I found something in Judge Caldwell's safe that proves the Mercy Creek conspiracy never ended. In 1991, during my final year with the Caldwell family, I discovered a document that made me understand the true scope of their operation. It was a population study of the entire Mississippi River Valley, marking every community that would be displaced by climate change over the next 50 years. But these weren't environmental predictions, they were elimination schedules. The document was titled Climate Migration Protocol, and it detailed how rising water levels would force millions of people to relocate from coastal areas. Mueller's organization wasn't just waiting for natural disasters. They were planning to accelerate them through deliberate environmental destruction, creating the largest forced migration in human history. Here's what made my blood freeze. The protocol specifically mentioned using tested Mercy Creek methods to manage the displaced populations. They weren't planning to help climate refugees. They were planning to eliminate them systematically as they fled their flooded homes, seizing every piece of high ground along the Mississippi River. Here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about their century-long conspiracy. Mueller's organization didn't just steal land from indigenous communities and small farmers. They've been deliberately destroying the environment to create the conditions for the largest genocide in human history. Every chemical spill, every pipeline leak, every accidental environmental disaster along the Mississippi River system has been carefully orchestrated to accelerate climate change and force mass migration. The families who profited from Mercy Creek aren't just land thieves. They're environmental terrorists who have been weaponizing climate change itself. The Pure 7 killed dozens of people in 1871, but Mueller's descendants are planning to eliminate millions through engineered environmental catastrophe. But here's what terrifies me most about this revelation. The Climate Migration Protocol wasn't just a plan for the future. It was already being implemented. I recognize some of the communities marked for elimination on those maps. The flooding that's been devastating Mississippi communities for the past decade isn't natural. It's the result of deliberate infrastructure sabotage, designed to drive people from their homes and into the hands of Mueller's elimination teams. If they've been engineering environmental disasters for decades to accelerate their genocide timeline, and if climate change is giving them the perfect cover for mass elimination, how many of the families fleeing flood zones are actually making it to safety, and how many are disappearing into the same mass graves that have been swallowing their victims since 1871? What I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about Mueller's organization. Because I wasn't just a domestic worker who overheard conversations and stole documents. I was Mueller's granddaughter. My birth name was Carmen Mueller Silva. He told me I would be sent to Mississippi to monitor their American operations, to make sure the Caldwell family was following orders and maintaining secrecy about their international network. But here's what my grandfather never told me. He didn't just send me to spy on the Caldwells. He sent me to eliminate them once their usefulness expired. The briefcase I carried from Brazil didn't just contain fake documents for my immigration. It contained detailed instructions for staging the deaths of every family member, disguised as natural causes or accidents. The letters from Brazil that I supposedly received about my sister's death, I wrote them myself, following my grandfather's orders. My sister never existed. My entire identity as a grieving immigrant was fabricated to gain the Caldwells' trust and access to their private documents. Here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about this conspiracy. Mueller's organization wasn't just coordinating land seizures across multiple continents. They were systematically eliminating their own operatives once each phase of their plan was complete. Every family involved in the Mercy Creek conspiracy, every judge who signed the orders, every social worker who planted evidence, they were all scheduled for elimination once the climate migration protocol entered its final phase. The Caldwells, the Whitmores, the Bishops, all of them thought they were partners in a generational wealth-building scheme, but they were actually just highly paid executioners who were always meant to be disposed of once their work was finished. Mueller's true plan was to eliminate every witness to their crimes, including the families who had been profiting from those crimes for over a century. Judge Caldwell's private safe didn't just contain maps of future elimination sites. It contained his own death warrant, scheduled for execution in 1995, along with detailed instructions for how his property would be seized and redistributed to Mueller's European investors. Every American family involved in this conspiracy had been living on borrowed time since 1871. But here's what terrifies me most about this revelation. I was supposed to complete my mission and return to Brazil in 1992. Instead, I've been hiding in Mississippi for 30 years, knowing that Mueller's organization considers me a rogue operative who knows too much about their complete network. If they've been systematically eliminating their own operatives for decades, and if they're still hunting me after all these years, what happens when they discover that I've been talking to documentary filmmakers about everything I know? What they don't know is that I never stopped being Carmen Mueller Silva. For 30 years, I've been feeding information back to my grandfather's organization, but not the information they wanted. I've been sending them false reports about the American families, while secretly documenting everything for a purpose they never suspected. My grandfather died in 1994, but his organization didn't die with him. It passed to my cousin Heinrich, who expanded their operations into Asia and Africa. The climate migration protocol wasn't just about the Mississippi River. It was a global template for using environmental disasters to eliminate populations and seize resources on every continent. But here's what the current leadership of Mueller's organization doesn't know. When my grandfather recruited me in 1959, he wasn't just training me to be a spy. He was teaching me to be his successor. Every document I stole, every conversation I recorded, every family I monitored, it was all part of my education to eventually take control of the entire network. The briefcase I carried from Brazil didn't contain orders to eliminate the Caldwell family. It contained the complete financial records of Mueller's organization, including bank accounts, shell companies, and property holdings worth over $2 billion. My grandfather gave me the keys to dismantle everything he had built, but only when the time was right. Here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about this century-long conspiracy. I didn't spend 30 years hiding from Mueller's organization. I spent 30 years secretly taking control of it. Every elimination order, every environmental disaster, every land seizure that's happened since 1994, I've been the one coordinating it all from my little house in Jackson, Mississippi. The climate migration protocol isn't being implemented by Heinrich Mueller in Germany. It's being implemented by me, using the same methods my grandfather taught me, but with one crucial difference. Instead of eliminating displaced populations, I've been using the organization's resources to relocate them safely, while seizing the assets of the families who originally profited from genocide. Every judge, every social worker, every government official who participated in the Mercy Creek conspiracy, They haven't been dying from natural causes over the past 30 years. They've been systematically eliminated by the same organization they thought they were working for, and I've been the one signing their death warrants. But here's what should terrify everyone listening. If I've been using a genocide network to eliminate the descendants of genocidal families, and if I've been doing it so successfully that no one suspected the truth for 3 decades, what happens when you realize that everyone who's been telling you this story tonight might not be who they claim to be? What makes this revelation truly terrifying isn't that I've been controlling Mueller's organization for 30 years. It's that I was never Carmen Mueller Silva at all. My real name is Maria Santos Hendricks. I'm the great-great-granddaughter of Mary Catherine Hendricks, the survivor who crawled out of that root cellar in 1871. Every story I told you about being Mueller's granddaughter was a lie designed to infiltrate their organization from the inside. The briefcase I carried from Brazil wasn't filled with elimination orders or financial records. It contained Mary Catherine's complete testimony, written in Portuguese, along with detailed plans for destroying Mueller's network that our family had been developing for over a century. When the real Carmen Mueller Silva was sent to spy on the Caldwell family in 1963, we intercepted her at the airport, and I took her place. For 60 years I've been feeding false information to Mueller's organization while systematically dismantling their operations. Every accidental death of their operatives, every mysterious disappearance of their documents, every failed land seizure, it was all orchestrated by the Hendricks bloodline, using their own methods against them. Here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about Mercy Creek. The 43 descendants of Mary Catherine Hendricks didn't just scatter across the South to gather evidence. We infiltrated every level of Mueller's organization, from domestic workers to bank executives to government officials. The conspiracy families thought they were hunting us down generation after generation, but we were actually surrounding them, getting closer to their leadership with each passing decade. Mueller's organization has been controlled by the Hendricks family since 1994. Every climate migration protocol operation, every environmental disaster, every elimination order, we've been using their own network to protect the communities they wanted to destroy, while simultaneously gathering evidence of their century-long genocide campaign. The descendants of the families who profited from Mercy Creek aren't just being eliminated by their former partners, they're being eliminated by the bloodline they've been trying to erase since 1871, using the same systematic methods they used against our ancestors. But here's what should terrify everyone listening tonight. If the Hendricks family has been secretly controlling an international genocide network for 30 years, and if we've been using it to eliminate hundreds of people we deemed complicit in historical atrocities, what makes you think our definition of justice will stop with the families directly connected to Mercy Creek? What makes you think we were ever seeking justice at all? My name is Esperanza Delgado, and I'm 79 years old. I've been living in New Orleans since 1968, working as a seamstress for the same families that funded Mueller's operations across the Americas. What I'm about to tell you will destroy everything you think you know about the Hendricks bloodline and their supposed mission of justice. Because I was there in 1994 when Maria Santos Hendricks met with Heinrich Muller in a warehouse outside São Paulo. I was the one who translated their conversation from Portuguese to German. The meeting wasn't about infiltrating Muller's organization to destroy it. It was about a merger. The Hendricks family hadn't been fighting the conspiracy for over a century. They had been competing with it for control of the same territories, using identical elimination methods against overlapping target populations. Mary Catherine Hendricks didn't survive the Sinners Purge by hiding in a root cellar. She survived because she was Mueller's original contact in Mississippi, the local operative who provided the Pure Seven with their target lists. The 17-page testimony that authorities buried for over a century wasn't a survivor's account of witnessing genocide. It was a detailed operational report documenting the success of their pilot program, complete with recommendations for expanding their methods to other territories. The same systematic hunting techniques, the same moral justifications, the same careful record-keeping. It was all designed by the Hendricks family and implemented by Mueller's organization as a joint venture. Here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about Mercy Creek. The Hendricks bloodline and Mueller's organization were never enemies. They were business partners who had been coordinating land seizures and population elimination across 2 continents since the 1840s. The supposed century-long mission of justice was actually a century-long consolidation of power. Every story about scattered descendants gathering evidence, every tale about infiltrating the conspiracy to destroy it from within, every claim about using their own methods against them, it was all theater designed to cover up the truth that both organizations had merged into a single entity decades ago. The climate migration protocol isn't being implemented by rogue operatives or vengeful descendants. It's being implemented by the same partnership that created the Sinners Purge, now expanded into a global network with over 2 centuries of experience in systematic elimination and environmental manipulation. If the Hendricks family and Muller's organization have been working together since before Mercy Creek was even built, and if everything we've been told about their conflict was deliberate misdirection, what other lies have they been telling us about who's really behind the disappearances happening right now? But what makes this revelation truly terrifying isn't that both organizations have been working together for over a century. It's what I discovered about who's really been telling you this story tonight. My name is Antonio Ribeiro, and I'm 83 years old. I've been living in Houston since 1964, working as a translator for international business meetings. For 50 years, I've been the voice that connected American families with their South American partners, translating conversations that were never meant to be understood by outsiders. What I'm about to tell you will shatter everything you think you know about tonight's documentary, because every person who has spoken to you, Rosa Santos, Carmen Silva, Maria Santos Hendricks, Esperanza Delgado, they're not real people sharing their testimonies. They're characters in a script that's been read by the same woman for the past 3 hours. The voice you've been hearing belongs to Dr. Patricia Almeida, a linguistics professor at Tulane University, who specializes in accent modification and regional dialects. She's been hired by someone to perform this entire documentary as a single-person theatrical production, changing her voice patterns and speech cadences to create the illusion of multiple elderly women from different backgrounds. Here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about Mercy Creek. There was no Sinners Purge in 1871. There was no Mary Catherine Hendricks. There was no Mueller organization. There was no climate migration protocol. Every document, every testimony, every government conspiracy, it's all elaborate fiction designed to test how quickly false information can spread through online documentary platforms. The 17-page testimony that authorities supposedly buried for over a century was actually written last month by a creative writing student at the University of Mississippi. The hidden contracts, the secret meetings, the international genocide network, it's all part of a psychological study measuring how readily people will believe conspiracy theories when they're presented in documentary format. What makes this revelation truly terrifying isn't that you've been listening to fiction for the past 3 hours. It's that Dr. Almeida has been recording every IP address, every comment, every subscription generated by this fake documentary. Someone has been using this fabricated story to identify and catalog people who are drawn to conspiracy theories about government cover-ups and systematic elimination. If this entire documentary was designed as a data collection operation targeting conspiracy theorists, and if your engagement with this content has been monitored and recorded for research purposes, what happens when you realize that clicking on videos like this one might have put you on a list you never intended to join? But what makes this revelation truly terrifying isn't that you've been listening to Dr. Almeida perform different characters. It's that she's been dead for 6 months. My name is Francisca Oliveira, and I'm 74 years old. I've been Dr. Almeida's neighbor in Houston since 2019. I was the one who found her body in March when she didn't answer her door for 3 days. The police ruled it a heart attack, but I knew better. Patricia had been receiving threatening phone calls for weeks before she died. She told me someone was pressuring her to record a documentary script about something called Mercy Creek. They offered her $50,000 to perform multiple character voices for what they claimed was a psychological study. But Patricia was terrified because the script contained real names, real addresses, and real government documents that she wasn't supposed to have access to. The night before she died, Patricia came to my house shaking. She said the people who hired her weren't university researchers at all. They were connected to families in Mississippi who needed to discredit anyone investigating historical land seizures. The fake documentary was designed to make real whistleblowers look like conspiracy theorists. Here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about tonight's documentary. Dr. Patricia Almeida recorded this entire script 6 months ago, but she hid additional audio files on her computer before she died, files that contained the real testimony of actual survivors from Mercy Creek, including evidence that proves the Sinners Purge actually happened and that the families responsible are still eliminating witnesses today. The voice you've been hearing tonight isn't just a dead woman's performance. It's been mixed with authentic recordings of elderly women who were murdered to prevent them from talking. Every time you heard someone new speaking, you were listening to a different victim whose testimony was silenced forever. Patricia's computer contained 17 separate audio files, each one a real person's final testimony before they disappeared. The people who hired her thought they were commissioning fiction to discredit the truth, but Patricia secretly recorded every real survivor she could find and embedded their voices into the fake documentary as a message to anyone listening carefully. If the families behind Mercy Creek have been killing people for 6 months to prevent this documentary from containing real testimony, and if Patricia died trying to preserve the actual evidence within a fictional framework, what happens when you realize that some of the voices you've been hearing tonight were recorded by women who knew they were about to be murdered? What makes this revelation truly terrifying isn't just that you've been listening to dead women's voices. It's what I discovered about who's really been commissioning these documentaries. My name is Benedita Carvalho, and I'm 76 years old. I've been working as a telephone operator for international calls in Miami since 1971. For 50 years, I've been connecting long-distance conversations between the United States and Brazil, but company policy required us to monitor calls for quality control. That's how I started recognizing the same voices, the same family names, making the same types of arrangements year after year. The calls always followed the same pattern. They would provide scripts, pay substantial fees, and receive finished audio recordings within weeks. But these weren't legitimate film productions. They were disinformation campaigns designed to flood the internet with false conspiracy theories. For the past 3 years, I've been recording these conversations on my personal equipment. The same families mentioned in tonight's documentary, the Whitmores, the Caldwells, the Bishops, they've been commissioning dozens of fake documentaries about Mercy Creek, each one containing different versions of the story. Some claim it was religious fanatics, others blame foreign conspiracies, some say it never happened at all. Here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about what you've been hearing tonight. The families behind Mercy Creek aren't trying to hide the truth about what happened in 1871. They're deliberately spreading so many different versions of the story that no one can tell which testimony is real anymore. Every documentary, every witness account, every piece of evidence, it's all part of a massive disinformation campaign designed to make the actual truth impossible to identify. The real Sinners Purge did happen, but it's been buried under hundreds of hours of fake testimonies, fabricated documents, and staged confessions. They've been using the internet to create so much noise around Mercy Creek that genuine survivors can't get anyone to believe their stories. Even when real evidence surfaces, it gets dismissed as just another conspiracy theory video. But here's what terrifies me most about their strategy. If they've been flooding the internet with fake documentaries for years, and if they're willing to kill people to obtain authentic testimony to mix with their fiction, how many other historical atrocities have they been covering up using the same methods, and how would we ever know the difference between their lies and the truth? But here's what makes their disinformation strategy truly terrifying. I wasn't just monitoring those calls between Mississippi and São Paulo. I was routing them through a private network that's been operating since 1952. My name is Dolores Machado, and I'm 81 years old. For 54 years, I've been the voice that connected American families with their Brazilian partners, but I was never supposed to understand what I was really facilitating. The telephone company I worked for wasn't a legitimate business. It was a front operation run by the same organization that's been commissioning these fake documentaries. Every call I connected, every conversation I monitored, every recording I made, it was all part of a massive communication network that's been coordinating disinformation campaigns across multiple countries for over half a century. But here's what changed everything about my understanding of their operation. In 1978, I accidentally connected a call to the wrong number. Instead of reaching their contact in São Paulo, the Mississippi caller was routed to a government office in Brasilia. The conversation I overheard that day revealed something that made my blood freeze. The Brazilian government wasn't just cooperating with the disinformation campaign. They were funding it. Here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about what's been happening for the past 50 years. The families behind Mercy Creek aren't private criminals trying to hide their ancestors' crimes. They're government contractors who have been systematically rewriting American history under official orders from agencies in both the United States and Brazil. Every documentary you've ever seen about historical atrocities, every conspiracy theory that floods the internet, every witness testimony that seems too outrageous to believe, it's all been manufactured by the same network I've been routing calls for since 1967. They're not just covering up Mercy Creek, they're controlling the entire narrative of American history. If Operation Historical Revision has been running for over 50 years, and if both governments have been actively manufacturing false versions of every major historical event, how do you tell the difference between what really happened and what they want you to believe happened? What makes Operation Historical Revision truly terrifying isn't just that both governments have been manufacturing false versions of historical events, it's what I discovered about who's really been giving them their orders. My name is Conceição Fernandes, and I'm 78 years old. I've been working as a cleaning lady in the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs since 1969. For 53 years, I've been emptying trash cans and dusting desks while government officials discuss their most sensitive operations. But what I found in a locked filing cabinet in 2019 changed everything I thought I knew about Operation Historical Revision. The documents weren't just communication records between American and Brazilian agencies. They were reports being sent to a third party that was coordinating the entire disinformation campaign. Every fake documentary, every fabricated testimony, every staged confession about Mercy Creek, it was all being reviewed and approved by someone who wasn't part of either government. The approval stamps on those documents contained a symbol I recognized immediately. It was the same mark that appeared on the eviction notices when my own family was forced off our land in Mato Grosso in 1963. The same symbol that appeared on legal documents when indigenous communities were displaced throughout the Amazon. The same symbol that showed up whenever valuable territory needed to be cleared for development. Here's the bombshell revelation that changes everything about the past 50 years. Operation Historical Revision wasn't created to cover up American historical atrocities. It was created to cover up ongoing atrocities that are happening right now, using the same methods that were tested at Mercy Creek in 1871. The families behind the Sinners Purge aren't just commissioning fake documentaries about events from 150 years ago. They're actively eliminating communities today, then flooding the internet with so many different versions of similar stories that when real survivors try to speak out, their testimonies get dismissed as just another conspiracy theory video. If they've been using historical disinformation to provide cover for contemporary genocide, and if every documentary about past atrocities is actually a smokescreen for present-day eliminations, how many communities are disappearing right now while we're distracted by debates about what happened in 1871? What makes this revelation truly terrifying isn't just that governments have been manufacturing false histories for decades. It's that I finally understand who's been controlling everything from the very beginning. My name is actually Mary Catherine Hendricks. I'm 28 years old, and I'm the great-great-great-granddaughter of the real Mary Catherine Hendricks. What I'm about to tell you will finally expose the truth that's been buried for over 150 years. Every voice you've heard tonight has been mine. I've been using artificial intelligence software to create different accents, different speech patterns, different personalities, but I wasn't creating fiction. I was protecting real testimonies by hiding them inside fake ones. My great-great-great-grandmother really did survive the Sinners Purge of 1871. She really did write a 17-page testimony, and she really did hide it from the authorities who wanted to bury the truth. But the testimony wasn't about what happened at Mercy Creek. It was about what she discovered was going to happen everywhere else. Mary Catherine found documents in 1871 that outlined a plan to eliminate indigenous populations, immigrant communities, and anyone who stood in the way of industrial expansion across the entire American continent. The Sinners Purge was just the first test run of methods that would be used for the next century and a half. She spent the rest of her life documenting every family involved, every government official who signed the orders, every bank that funded the operations. When she died in 1943, she passed that documentation to her daughter with strict instructions. Keep watching, keep recording, Keep waiting for the right moment to expose everything. For 6 generations, my family has been gathering evidence while the descendants of those original families continued their work. We've been waiting for technology that would let us tell the complete story without getting eliminated like every other witness who tried to speak out. The families behind Mercy Creek never stopped operating. They just got better at covering their tracks. Every mysterious disappearance, every community displaced by development, every environmental disaster that clears valuable land, it's all connected to the same network that was tested in Mississippi in 1871. But here's what they never expected. My generation doesn't just have written testimonies and hidden documents. We have video evidence, financial records, recorded conversations, and digital proof of everything they've been doing for the past 30 years. Tonight's documentary wasn't just about exposing historical crimes. It was about forcing their current operations into the light. Every fake story I told contained real names, real locations, real methods they're using right now. By making it all sound like conspiracy theory, I could include details that would have gotten me killed if I'd presented them as factual investigation. The climate migration protocol is real. The systematic elimination of communities is happening right now. The government agencies being used as weapons against innocent families are operating in Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Tennessee as we speak. But they made one crucial mistake. They assumed that because they've been successful for 150 years, they could continue operating in the shadows forever. They never considered that someday, someone would use their own disinformation tactics against them. Every IP address that accessed this documentary has been forwarded to FBI investigators who have been building cases against these families for the past 5 years. Every comment, every share, every person who watched until the end, you've all just become witnesses in the largest criminal investigation in American history. The real testimony of Mary Catherine Hendricks has been submitted to federal prosecutors along with 6 generations of evidence that proves continuous criminal operations from 1871 to present day. The families who thought they were untouchable are about to discover that the Hendricks bloodline was never interested in revenge. We wanted justice, and after 150 years of patience, we finally have enough evidence to get it. This is the moment. Everything changes. You need to subscribe now, because what happens next will reshape everything you thought you knew about American history. The families we expose tonight won't stay quiet. They'll try to discredit this documentary, claim it's all fiction, flood the internet with counter-narratives. Mash that like button now to feed the algorithm and make sure this truth reaches millions of people before they can silence it. This is the moment to show your support for real investigative journalism that risks everything to expose the truth. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what we've just revealed. Share every detail you remember, every connection you've made, every question you want answered. Your engagement is what keeps this story alive and protects it from being buried. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to know this outcome. Don't wait another second to share, because only true fans understand the importance of supporting channels that expose dangerous truths the mainstream media won't touch. The next documentary drops in 48 hours with video evidence that will shock you even more than tonight's revelations. You don't want to miss what we've uncovered about what's happening right now in your own communities.